Hello everyone, my name is Jennifer Zeng. From today on, I'd like to share you the story of my father. But before I share the story of my father, let me first of all talk about why I think it is important to share you the story of my father. Because my father's story is something that you cannot hear from anywhere else. It can offer you a real window, a rare window, to look through the facade that the official propaganda wants to create for you to see. Through my father's story, you will see a real China, a truer China, and what the real situation of the Chinese society is under the rule of the Chinese Communist Party. And why should we care about learning the true situation of China? Why does China matter? And here is what I think. With China's economy having become the second largest one in the world, with China's continuous expansion of its power throughout the world, and with its influence and infiltration operations in many countries, it is important not only for the lawmakers, policymakers, researchers, China experts to learn more about China, but also important for ordinary citizens to have a better understanding and how life could be for ordinary Chinese citizens in a totally different society. For the very least, every one of us has bought something made in China, right? And in recent years, socialism seems to have become more and more attractive for many people, especially young people in the West. These people have never had the experiences of living in a socialist or communist society, but somehow are attracted by the vision of it. So, I hope my father's story can offer some real-life experiences of living in a socialist society, learned with many people's lives, blood, and sufferings. I hope that through my father's story, everyone can learn something that can benefit them. Shall we treat China, or rather the Chinese Communist Party, as a friend, a partner, a competitor, a rival, or an enemy? Here I won't say anything about what I think, but I hope that after listening to my father's story, you will be able to reach your own conclusion and a better informed one. Okay, that's all. Now let me start sharing the story of my father. My father was born into an ordinary peasant family in Chaozhong village. I'm pretty much sure you have never heard this name, but that doesn't matter. Anyway, this Chaozhong village is in Sichuan province. And he was born in 1933, 16 years before the Chinese Communist Party took power in China. I heard that my grandmother had given birth to 12 children, but only 9 of them survived. And my father was the second eldest son in the family and had a lot of brothers and sisters, younger ones, to look after. So from a very young age, he was very naturally expected to share the responsibilities of supporting the family. I actually didn't have a chance to visit my father's home village when I was already in my high school. That was 1980. So when I went back to the village of my father, several of my uncles were still living there. And they lived in the very old houses that they inherited from our ancestors. And those houses were made of mud walls, with literally no furniture inside it and no electricity. So in the night, people had to rely on the very dim kerosene lamps to maybe if they want to go somewhere, they hold a lamp in their hand to light the road for them. So for me, when I look at that kind of condition, I thought, my God, this should be called absolute poverty. And so I didn't understand why my father's social category should be labeled as small land lessor. Literally, this small land lessor means my father's family had very small area of land, but they hire others, or they lease their land for others to farm. I'm not quite sure whether anybody have heard about the terms social class category, and I'm not sure whether it's a correct translation of it. So the Chinese is 成分 or 阶级成分. This is a very special thing, I think, in China. Let me talk a little bit about it. In 1949, when the Chinese Communist Party took power in China, the first thing they did is to give everybody in the society a social class category. You have to belong to some social class, and then everybody was treated differently according to what kind of social class category they belonged to. For example, in the countryside, they label different people to different social class category according basically to how much land they own. Before the Communist Party, Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, came to power. So from top to bottom, there were landlords who own a lot of land, and then rich peasants who may own less land but were still very rich, and then middle class peasants, and then lower middle class peasants, and then poor peasants. So according to how much land and how rich or how poor you were classified into different category and treated very differently because of your social class category. Of course, that was before the CCP came into power. After the CCP came into power, they actually confiscate all the land from everybody. So they took back all the land from the private owners, and the state actually, in theory, the state or the government or everybody together, collectively, owning all the land in the country. So my father's social class categories is a very special one. It's not usually known by others. It's called a small land lessor. It may be somewhere between rich peasant and middle class peasant. And in the city, they also give everyone a different social category, like capitalists, workers, proletarians. Also according to your social status, whether you own a factory, you own a shop in the city, or how much money you have, or you only work for others. And again, depending on what kind of social category you belong to, you would be treated very differently after the CCP came into power, and not only you, but also your children and children's children. So anyway, I learned the term small land lessor when I was 6 years old, when I enrolled in primary school. And again, there is something I have to introduce to everyone, that is called a personal archive. So back in China, when I went to school, I'm not quite sure about the situation now. Anyway, in those days, a personal archive for everybody was set up as soon as you enrolled in primary school. So there is a form for you to fill in. Of course, your name, your father's and mother's name, and very importantly, which social class category your father and your mother belonged to. And that's when and why I learned the term a small land lessor, because when as a one grade student of primary school, I didn't understand how to fill in or what my father's social category was. So I asked my mother. Of course, my mother told me your father's social status was, or social class category was, small land lessor. So when talking about my father's social class category, my mother said this: it was very unfair. There were so many brothers and sisters in your father's family. Overall, they didn't own much land. If it were calculated based on the average land area per person, your father's family should have been categorized as middle peasants at most. Only because they have hired people to help farming the land, they were categorized as a small land lessor, which was unfairly high. Why was it so terrible if you belong to the higher social class category? Because if you hire other people to work for you, you belong to the class that exploit the working class, and that again in a socialist country is a crime. So you are the exploiting kind of social class. So if you hire any people to work for you, whether you are in the city or in the countryside, that is a crime according to the Marxism theory. So that's why my mother was very angry, because my father was categorized as a small land lessor. Although I didn't fully understand mother's explanation, however, I somehow already knew that it was a terrible thing if you were ranked high in the social category. At that time, the grandfather of a girl in our class was a landlord, and the entire class looked down upon that girl. I remember once I went to that girl's home to do something, and unintentionally I suddenly saw an old man sitting in the corner quietly, and I still remember him wearing a black cotton padded coat. And then suddenly I realized this must be her landlord grandfather, and immediately I felt struck with fear, because in our education, a landlord is something as bad as a monster. So I really felt like I have just seen a monster, so I hurriedly made up an excuse and escaped from her home as fast as I could. Anyway, this is just to give you a little bit of sense of how social class category is affecting everybody in China. And also let me come back to talk a little bit about this personal archive I talked about a little bit earlier. So basically, as soon as the personal archive was set up to you, everything about you was recorded in that archive, including how all your scores, your exam scores, and all the comments your teacher made about you, and all your family situation, and all the good and bad things about you. And whenever you go, if you were transferred to another school, or you go to a middle school or the university, this personal archive always follow you. So the strange thing is, everybody had a personal archive with everything about this person recorded in the archive, but nobody is allowed to have a read of the archive himself. Only the party members or the head or the leaders of your workplace or your school had the right to read it. So today we all heard about the social credit score the Communist Party is trying to establish, or is trying to give into everybody. Actually, this is not a new idea. This personal archive, only at that time we didn't have computer, we didn't have so many cameras set up in the society, but everything about you was recorded on paper, and with paper and ink, and stored in the paper envelope anyway. So the idea is the same, only today it's became electronically personal archive. So at that time we already had a paper personal archive anyway. Fortunately enough, for my mother's side, the social class category was poor people in the city, which was part of the proletariat. actually my mother's foster father was once a capitalist who owned a shop in the county. Actually, my father came to know my mother when he worked in that shop as an apprentice. But later on, my mother's foster father became addicted to opium. So as a result, he spent all his wealth. So when the CCP took power in 1949 and gave everyone a social class category, he was therefore classified as poor people in the city. Why it is so important to become part of the proletariat in China? Because according to socialism category, the proletarian class is the class that the party is relying on to rule the country. They are the best. They are the ones to rely upon to liberate the whole world. So anyway, that's the social class category and personal archive we already had as soon as the CCP took power. So everybody in the society belongs to some special social class, and everybody is tightly controlled through your personal archive and through whichever social class category you belong to. So that's all for today. I'll talk more about my father's story next time. See you. Bye.